We're so glad that 100 children that joined we one more again for zooming in on sustainability. This year, the Queen Quet, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation, we're so glad for dear one more again. Well, glad God 100 children look, yeah, we done do 2 months what of this year. Ain't that something? We done gone through a whole 2 months. We done gone on through a 3 month. And where God we making we wait till 4th month of zooming in on sustainability. I so glad that 100 children taught them not robbery, but join we right here. Now I know plenty of 100 children wish you been young, honey, see any, but join we. But we so glad that you can see we and yet more about who we be down here in the Gullah Geechee Nation from Jacksonville, North Kakalaki to Jacksonville, Florida. So every time we come from this year program, we first want to pay homage to some of your ancestors. So this your day, since we're going to be zooming in on Black labor and labor union and we story, we want to dedicate this year program to Air Philip Randolph. We want to dedicate this year program to the first Gullah Geechee man and thing, what be part of the ILA, the International Longshoremen Association. We want to dedicate this year to the late Miss Mary Moutry, who been one of the leaders in the Charleston Hospital Worker Strike. And we want to dedicate this year to all the workers who have been the people of Mother Africa, the children of Mother Africa, who we know that the labor, leave it easier for do if you have other people did it with you too in union. So let me take a moment of silence. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Well, I'm so glad for day with all 100 children and thing as we lead toward this year holiday that 100 children crack your teeth about called Labor Day. Some of we down here in the Gullah Geechee Nation will say that every day, any. But the other rest of the people around the world, y'all might say, oh, well, not necessarily so. That y'all have these things called holiday, you have these things called vacation, you take these times off. Well, in the Gullah Geechee Nation, we were raised through the same thing our ancestors had to suffer through during chattel enslavement, called the task system. So I remember growing up here and your parents and your grandparents, the aunties, the uncles would give you tasks to do. And they expected you to have those tasks done within the amount of time that they said was allocated for it. So if they said by the time they go to the store and come back, by the time they get home from work because you coming from school, whatever it was, they gave you a certain frame of time to get a thing done. Well, we learned very quickly. If you wanted to get out there and play with the cousins and other people, it'll be a good idea if they come over for them to help you get it done. So that was the thing that our ancestors did even during chattel enslavement. They helped each other do what we say, catch up your row and things like that. They helped each other get work done. Well, as the time came that people exited chattel enslavement, because diverse Black labor and being united in that labor really was on plantations. So they had realized already and had a system that many of our people had operated in themselves to make jobs more efficient, would make it easier for themselves, and to try to benefit from these things themselves. So when they started forming unions, they fought for the rights of the collective, not for the rights of just, oh, me by myself, but for the whole group. What can we get that will help all of us? I remember when I had my first job in New York City, I was part of a union. After that, all those corporate jobs I had didn't have unions. I noticed a very big difference in what our payment packages were, what our healthcare packages were in many cases. Unless you were at a very big corporation like the last one that I left, you could kind of see the difference in terms of what your benefits packages were. Holidays, paid or not, how much vacation time, all of what your payment was with that, what kind of retirement plans you might build up to have, and those kind of things. Now, being from the South, folks didn't talk a lot about unions. But interestingly enough, we had several unions in the South. Many of you might have seen a film that I love called 20,000 Black Men Named George, which talks about the history of the Pullman car porters. So many times when you talk about Black labor unions, we immediately think of who I dedicated the show to, A. Philip Randolph, because we learned about the union of the sleeping car porters that he led and how he had to fight for their rights and go all over the country and gain members because they were being disrespected to the point that they didn't even have their names called properly. They would just call them Georges. Everybody, don't care what your name was George. I guess some might say, well, that was a step up from being called boy, but it's still inappropriate because that's not their names, right? So here it is that we had that film that was so powerfully done that really articulated the work that he did there. But many people don't realize that there were native Gullah Geechees that were part of the Pullman Car Porters Union, one of which was a relative of mine, God bless the dead, Brother Robinson. He lived to be 104, and then he passed away. So it was an honor to know someone personally and have someone in my family that was part of such a rich history of fighting for our rights, even though they had to tolerate some abuses at those jobs still. But now, as I started looking into more of the historic legacy here in the Sea Islands along our coast from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, I found that there have been these contentious battles about different types of unions other than Pullman car porters, because people saw that as subservient jobs. Okay, fine. But there was also a long-standing union that I got to know over the years since we developed the Gullah Geechee Nation International Music and Movement Festival. And that's the ILA 1422, the International Longshoremen's Association in Charleston, South Carolina, here in the Gullah Geechee Nation. Got a lot of love for them brothers and sisters in there, a lot of love for them. Because when we approached them and said the Gullah Geechee Nation wanted to have our own festival that we financed so that we could highlight the independence of our companies, the independence of our artists, and so that we could show people that we are and can remain self-sufficient. They were one of the first ones to step up and give us over $1,000 for a sponsorship of that festival. So I have a lot of love for those brothers and sisters in there for voting for that and then continuing to do that for many, many years. When I first started knowing about them and getting engaged with the ILA in Charleston, I wasn't aware of the history of the ILA and that there are other ones that are not Gullah Geechee run, okay? Because actually the 1422 in Charleston, there's another group in Jacksonville, Florida. There's another set in Savannah, Georgia. There were folks down in Brunswick, Georgia, that were all part of the ILA that were leaders that were all native Gullah Geechee. So I always have taken pride in that. So that made me have even more love for unions because our culture wouldn't be here if we didn't know how to unify and to work in union together. So I feel like they exemplified that. And then look at it. The ILA has representation just in the Charleston area of thousands of workers. When you look at their websites, they talk about the 65,000 maritime workers that the ILA represents. So imagine that kind of power. Imagine the political power in a year of an election that your union can bring to bear. So when I was in New York, I learned there were a whole lot of other unions, a whole plethora of them. They're in the arts and entertainment industry. So I'm also in the Screen Actors Guild, okay, because many of you know I've worked on many different films. But then there are also medical unions. So here it is that I found out about one called 1199. Well, it took coming back down to Charleston again to find out that in the 1950s, there was some upheaval going on because you had a hospital in Charleston. You had all these Black folks working there, nurses, aides, and other things. They were not getting benefits that they should have been getting. So they decided to have a strike during the Civil Rights Movement. Some people that we know personally, like Mr. Bill Saunders, was engaged in it, but those sisters were running that show. And the late Mary Moultrie was one of the main leaders of the strike. I was honored to meet her before she passed, We first stood on stage together in Washington, D.C., when she and I and Dr. Najma Thomas were 3 Gullah Geechee women honored by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History for being living legends. That is the same organization that celebrates, that founded the Black, which started off as Negro History Week, became Negro History Month, and is now Black History Month. So in a major celebration of over 1,100 people were there for that award ceremony. They honored us. And that was my first time meeting Miss Mutri, God bless the dead. And then I was with her when they actually finally unveiled the marker in honor of the Charleston hospital workers strike. The irony of it is the marker exists at what is now the Medical University of South Carolina. That wasn't the name of the hospital at the time they did the striking, but that was the location. So they unveiled the marker. Her family is there. We're all there. Community members are there. People who have participated in the strike were there. You know, leaders now that are in office in South Carolina were there. And it was somewhat ironic because I turned around and said, but I didn't know we had a hospital union in South Carolina. And they said, and we still don't. So the strike that went on for 100 days ended up with a settlement. But it didn't settle on South Carolina having this union. And even now, there are commercials from time to time on the air when new companies come to South Carolina and again, end up in Charleston. And the discussion becomes, should the workers have or have not? Should the workers have a union or shouldn't they? And so today, in honor of Labor Day, which is that day that people who are in unions take off to honor that legacy. And in New York City, they had the biggest Caribbean parade and thing for them wind down and all that for Labor Day every year, you know. So you would say this is the way, so we celebrate, but not work today. Work done, and things like that there. So, you know, that's the thing. And most of the Caribbean people that I knew in New York and knew in New York, they're in jobs that got the union. And if it got the union, they's in the union. Because they know the union go and fight for them. They go and fight together. They go and get the bus or what they're supposed to have while they're working. I had the bus thing when they retire. So I know somebody else who's a native of Charleston who retired already. And I remember us talking about this union thing various times. And it didn't dawn on me she was in yet another union. Because people always say, well, the South is a labor union busting place. They don't like no unions there. Well, I done told you about several already. So now I want somebody who actually worked in one here to talk about the one she was in. And you've seen her here on Zooming In before, our Minister of Information for the Gullah Geechee Nation, Elder Carly Town. How honored to do, Elder Town? What's going on?
I'm doing fine, Queen. It's such a wonderful thing to be on air with you and Kwame talking about union. It's a good time to talk about union because we all need to be together. And I'm excited because the union, I work for AT&T and Bell South, and we had the CWA union, which is the Communication Workers of America. And if it wasn't for that union and my self-determination, I would not have lasted as long as I did in Southern Bell. Because
really?
they really worked, they really did work for the people. And what I mean by that is that there were times where a lot of injustices, and you know, we know about injustices,
yes, ma'am,
in the workplace would take place. But all you had to do is say, hey, I got to talk to my union person right now. And you could go and talk to your union person and tell them, and then we would come together with the people that are discriminating and talk about how we are going to resolve these problems or else. And it was just, it was a force to be reckoned with. And I always, no matter what, stayed in your union. When we had a strike, I never crossed the line. I made sure I strike. There are some people, well, I don't want to lose my money. I didn't care, because I knew that the union was more powerful than me gaining a couple of pennies. I know I would gain even more.
Yes, you gain dollars instead of just pennies, right?
Right. And instead of me we would actually, they would negotiate for our health care. They would negotiate for our working conditions. And we still had a say so. Even if we weren't happy with them, we could tell them, look, no, I'm not happy with that. And then we could go back to the table and say, we can negotiate another better thing for the people. So I was an advocate for it. People used to say, Miss Carly ain't playing. Miss Carly quiet, but she ain't playing because she know her rights. And that's one of the things that I respect so much about the Gullah Geechee Nation, is that we like that union. And I think that spirit just was over me, and it just made me become more available for the nation, because I realized that we got to stick together. And we have to fight for our rights sometime. And I don't mean physically fight. It could be a mental fight. Because sometimes I would come home and pray and go to my mom and say, Mom, you know what happened today? And I just don't know what I'm going to do about it. By the time I got through praying, by the time I got to sitting down, thinking it out, and you always had to keep a paper trail.
That's right. You
have
better.
a paper trail.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. So
I ain't agree to that and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. I know I got kind of excited because I'm always thinking about how they mold me into always thinking about we have rights. A lot of people didn't even realize that we had rights. They were like, well, they tell us we got to go to Columbia because there ain't no jobs here. I said, as long as the building is here, you got a job. Find a way to keep that job, keep yourself in this city. But some people say, well, I going because I want to lose my job. I said, okay.
Here we go again. And the whole point is for the union to help you keep the job, but have it even better than you would have had it just on your own.
Yeah, so, and we had into people who were the middle person. So we had our peers who were the middle person, who we would take our grievances to, and then they could take it to the union. And if they didn't do what they were supposed to do, we could actually go directly to the union and say, hey, I'm not happy with this situation here. Can you help me? And there were certain bylaws, you know, that you had to go by because we had already negotiated a contract. And that contract said, well, if you're supposed to be here at 7 o'clock, you better be here at 7 o'clock. That's part of the contract. And if you here at 7:02, you late.
You breached the contract. You breached it. Yeah, so you can't argue no point there because you in the wrong. Right.
That's right.
So, yeah. So tell me this. So now when you entered into the CWA, right? This was after the Charleston hospital worker strike had already taken place, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So were you in the city when the hospital worker strike took place? Were you actually there in Chucktown at that time, or were you out of town?
No, I always was here. I've been here since, you know, day one. So I went to work at AT&T in '69.
Oh yes, so that was 4 years after, I believe, the strike took place,
in
right?
'69, yes.
Yeah. So do you remember how it felt in Chucktown when that strike was going on? Were people there really aware of what was happening or what was going on?
Well, people were aware because I have family members that participated, and my mom was a nurse. So they you know, they participated in the way that they knew how to participate. They may not have been at the strike at that particular time doing the strike, but they would do other things, maybe pass out flyers or sing. My sister Thomasina, she did a lot because she would work with Mr. Bill Saunders and all those. So she was there, a part of that. You know, she ended up going to jail because she was very vocal. I remember when we was at her house, I think it was the National Guard came there with the guns, because anybody who they thought was in these particular strikes, they would come out to those people's house and say, well, we heard you were doing so and so, you know, whatever.
So they try to intimidate the people.
And intimidation took place even with unions in AT&T and Southern Bell. There were certain intimidations, yes. But you had to really know who you needed to go to, because some of the people was part of the intimidation.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. So that's interesting, because I know something you mentioned earlier too, is in terms of your intermediaries. And I know that's where Kwame Shah, who's here with us again today, who many of you have seen here on Zooming in, I brought him in today because I know, Kwame, you actually were part of 1199, but in New York City, and that you were actually a union delegate. So you are
Yes.
the intermediary that Eldertown is talking about. Can you talk to what made you join that union? And what is it that you might give as a vantage point from having been a delegate, and especially in a situation like Eldertown is describing now, that like if somebody was on strike and then folks going to be intimidating them trying to stop the strike. I mean, how would the delegate deal with something like that? Have you ever had to deal with the strike at all since you were in the union?
Yes, well, first, thanks for having me on. And just to do a little correction, that strike that was down in Charleston was unfortunately after Martin Luther King was assassinated. It was because Coretta Scott King participated in that
Yeah,
strike.
she was part of it. Yeah.
Right, so that was 68 or 69.
69,
So,
yeah. So same
right,
year that Eldertown went into CWA, not
right,
65. Yeah, but I
right.
know that there was a history already in place with a number of
Yes,
other things that were going on, where a lot of
right.
planning and the people at Eldertown and I know were ready. Let's say there were rumblings, right, already before the
Yeah.
actual strike took place. And that's what I'm thinking about. Like there were those rumblings of people grumbling and
A lot of
upset, and
gripes. Yeah, a
knowing
lot
they're
of
not
gripes
getting
going
what
on.
they're supposed to. Yeah, gripes.
Right.
And then because they didn't already have a union, they didn't have no intermediary, they didn't have delegates. So like she said, some people were, well, I don't know if I should say no, I don't want to lose my job.
Right.
No. So now what
Right.
should we do? So it takes a little while. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because in my head I'm thinking about listening to them tell me the stories of what happened before the historic strike really took place. So, it wasn't like we mad today and we strike tomorrow. No, these things go on for a little while. And then finally people strategize and they begin to organize. And then here comes what history writes about. Here's what the newspapers publish. So yeah, but go ahead. Go ahead, Kwame.
Well, oddly enough, my involvement in the union first was by accident. I started working in what used to be Brooklyn Jewish Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, as an audiovisual technician. And at the time, I was working in the School of Nursing there. Right. And so the union recognized me that as a tech, that I should be a union member. Anybody who's doing anything technical should be automatically, grandfathered into the union. So that's how I first got involved in the union. And I remember we did have a strike. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. There was a strike that was taking place, and I remember my supervisor coming to me. So, well, you don't have to participate in the strike. You can always come in. And I looked at it and I said, what, you want me to cross the line? Well, yeah, because you want to make your money. I said, I will do no such thing. Yeah. And, she looked at me as if I was crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. So, fast forwarded, after working at that institution and working at another totally different outside of the medical field, but also an organization that had a union. I worked for ABC Television, and they had the NABIT union, National Association of Broadcast and Employees and Technicians. So I worked there for a short period of time, but then ended up going back working in the medical field in a behavioral health clinic, and that was in Bronx, New York, and it was a affiliation of Our Lady of Mercy Hospital.
Interesting.
And the union came, and that's when they were starting to recognize, and this is when the union was now under the leadership of Dennis Rivera. So now you could say that this union was now turning from what was originally organized by a Polish man, Leon Davis, back in 1932, moving forward now into 80s, Dennis Rivera. And now you start to see the complexion of that union really start to change with more Hispanics, with more people of color, African Americans from the US, and then coming in from the Caribbean, and now even more so coming in from Africa. So the complexion of that union changed. So I was glad that they grandfathered me in. That allowed me to bring my years over when I was working at Brooklyn Jewish Hospital over as well. And because they now started having problems at the hospital and how they were treating us in the pay scale and so forth, people would complain, but nobody would say anything. And people say, well, Kwame, why are you always talking about, they need to change these things. You should become a delegate. And I didn't want to do that. Let me just make it plain. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that, but, constantly seeing the unfairness and me being, also one of the ones who's being treated unfair. There were a couple of us, myself, one of my Hispanic brothers, Kali Ramirez. We decided, we're gonna join the union. We're gonna become delegates. So they had the petitions, and we got elected as delegates. So you basically become the mouthpiece for your union brotherhood, for your fellow workers, and we would sit in on negotiations. We would sit in on all the contract negotiations as well, at headquarters with, League of Health and Hospitals. And we would have some serious fights going on. There was some serious fights. There were some things that they just did not want to give up. But, there's a saying, as they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Gets the oil.
And I got to say, us as a people, when we need to get loud, we get loud.
Right.
So with that union, especially in New York, with the crush of people of color now working in the hospitals, we had that voice. We pushed, and again, Dr. Martin Luther King was a strong advocate for us, as well as one of his compatriots, Ozzie Davis, always strong advocates for us. So we were now able to really move into a strong political position.
Right.
And we've been behind presidents and just like now, the union is still behind the push for the Democratic, nominee for this year's election.
Right.
So that's the thing that I see that we should really take a stronger look at, especially the unions that you can say are Black or African American unions or gullahgeechee unions.
Yeah.
You have to now use your political power to put the agendas together.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we have to make sure that we have coming forward, even in this election. What is the agenda that we want for African Americans?
Right.
What is the ILA, which is a Gullah-Geechee union? What does the ILA see, not just for the International Longshoremen's Association, but for Gullah-Geechees as well? Because they're affiliated jobs that are, working with the ILA.
Right.
The Teamsters, the truckers. I'm sure you got a bunch of Gullah-Geechees who are driving trucks and loading, and so all of that is part of that. And and I, I've learned a lot about politics being a delegate, for my years as a delegate. I was a delegate, I think, for about 17, 18 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
And so I learned a lot about the political power that unions have, both within the workplace and outside of the work, and in your community as well.
Absolutely, in your community. And so when you mentioned the term brotherhood, because it was the brotherhood of Pullman car porters, they were called the brotherhood because when these things first started out, of course, you might have been able to get in Eldertown, and I wouldn't have with the early years of unions, because they were men who were going out to these jobs, because as you mentioned, a lot of these are considered, the tough jobs, but actually, one of our original Council of Elders members, Vera Manigault, who people know her as a sweetgrass worker, she actually worked at the docks in Charleston. And so when you mention her name at the ILA, we all know Vera. Who don't know Vera? And things like that. So, over time, the women had to get in here and get tough themselves, in many of these situations, like Eldertown is saying, and become delegates and not just argue for issues, like you say, at the job, but in the community. Get out here and take it to the streets and be those leaders as well. And so, I watch, me, I love reading. And I also love documentaries. And so I watched a lot of documentaries about the early years, as they say, the Reconstruction period, the Gilded Age period, which is, run parallel, but for we Black folk in the Reconstruction, for the other rest of people, it might have been a gilded time. We trying to get it going. We wasn't gilded yet, but you see this viciousness when there are strikes, and where the people say, well, that's enough of that. You're not going to continue to work us all these hours in these doggone sweaty conditions, and you don't have stuff, and we can't take a good lunch break or nothing like that. You're telling us we got to work through the holidays. We're not going to do it. And they would come together, but then you'd have what they call the scabs, the people that they would bring in to fight them, to try to take over their job while they were out front striking, and you saw blood spill, you know, over a lot of this stuff. So I know when both of you are talking about going on strike, when I was in union, we didn't have any strikes going with our union. I've never heard of our union having a strike, but I know that of everybody else that I seem to have met has had to go on strike at some point. And it's wonderful for both of you to be those tough fighters that say, well, not me, I didn't cross the line. I wasn't going to join those scabs. I wasn't going to do that. You stayed in with your union, and that's where that brotherhood and that sisterhood component comes in, and had to take life and be real. So it's wonderful. Yeah, so Elder Town. Yeah, go ahead, Elder Town. Go ahead.
I had some of my best friends, they were scabs. No. But you know, my best friends, but what would happen is that we would have to do, the people who on the side of the union would do what they have to do. And when we got back to work and everything was all good, we still were friends. Because everybody had a different perspective. But what I didn't understand is that some people wasn't willing to sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, and they used us as sacrificial lambs. Y'all go ahead and do it. I can't do it because I got the same bills that you have.
Right.
So, and the thing about it too, the union still took care of them. If they had a problem, they still could have go to the union, even if they hadn't paid any dues or wasn't a part of the union.
Is that so? Because that's not how our union worked.
That's the way AT&T did. Right. You could go to the union. You could go to the union and tell them your problems.
We kind of had the same situation. It was really unfortunate, especially during my later years when I was working up until the point where I retired, where, you know, our workers were really just being abused, both on time and on pay and on workload. And it came to a point where the union actually brought up a class action lawsuit against the League of Health and Hospitals, and in particular, the hospital that we were affiliated with, St. Barnabas Hospital at the time. And I would go around and say to the workers, you could now put your name in and be part of this class action lawsuit, you know, because they were doing things that were actually weakening the union. Right. We had strict work hours. You worked either 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock shift, 9 to 5, you know, 10 to 6, 11 to 7. But they would pile the workload on so that people would end up working overtime. But you weren't getting paid for it because they were not authorizing overtime. But what that does is that weakens the union. You're supposed to, look, you work 9 to 5, you punch your card, and you had to punch a card. You had to punch a time clock.
I remember that.
You punch that clock at 9 a.m., you punch that clock at 5. Why? Because they're not going to pay you a dime over. So what they would do, they would punch the clock, but then go back into the office and continue to work 8 to 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Oh, no.
And so we finally got to the point where we would organize them and put this class action lawsuit together. And unfortunately, half of the workers that I was representing didn't want to even put their names in for the lawsuit because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. They're afraid of retaliation.
Right.
Well, it took some months. Actually, it took about a year. But we won that class action lawsuit.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now, the ones who didn't come in said, well, yo, do you think I could put my name in now? I said, I don't think you're going to get anything. You'll benefit from what's going to happen because the contract now would have an amendment in it that would say, anytime this amount of work is put on, you have to authorize overtime. Yeah, they benefit from that going forward. But the ones who filed the class action lawsuit, some of them got, I would say not some of them, most of them got 5 and some 6 figures worth of back overtime pay.
Wow.
Excellent. That's excellent. That is excellent.
But
That
the ones who
is.
didn't file, they didn't get
They
that
didn't
pay,
get
but they still got the benefit of what
Benefit.
the
Going
now
forward.
amended and new ratified contract was. So
Right.
yeah, we didn't want to boot them out, but
Right, I understand.
You know.
So they ended up, yeah,
Mhm.
like you said, benefiting. But I mean, if we look at anything like that with any movement, with any
Mhm.
union of people,
Right.
there are those who are the fighters. There are those who sacrifice, like Elder Town said, like even with
Right.
the Gullah Geechee Nation. A lot
Yes.
of people are still sitting here in the Gullah Geechee Nation, still on land, because we sacrificed,
True.
because we took the death threats, because we took the
Right.
aggravation. We took
Mm.
our own money and went to meetings and fought on their behalf so that
Right.
they wouldn't say,
Right.
well, nobody was here. So silence gave consent. So eminent domain, take that
Right.
property from. You know, we fought for them when they didn't even know to fight for themselves, but they sitting up here pretty on land. You know, they're sitting up here talking about, oh, we still young. I'd have been young. Blah, 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 blah. But you wouldn't actually be there had we not acted on our rights, like Elder Town said, and
That's
knew our human right to self-determination, knew that we wanted to remain self-sufficient. And how more self-sufficient can you be than a unified group of people on land that you own? So
Right.
again, even after we do the sacrificing, there's all these people that come later that benefit. There's people that sitting on the side, let them go ahead, Joe. I ain't gonna fool up with them, they gonna get you killed and all them kind of stuff. And now they well, hello, thank you, ma'am. Thank me for what? What you thank me for? Well, no, just appreciate all you do. Them kind of remark, meaning you know you done got some benefit. Like we saved your house because they were gonna run a road right through there and they would have took your house from eminent domain. We saved your church. They were gonna run a road right through there. Your church would be there. We saved your business. They was gonna run a road through there. You wouldn't have had it. We saved your graveyard. So your family can continue to bury there. So a lot of people don't tell the whole story, but y'all know how the story go later.
Right.
The story go the same way the civil rights movement story go. I've been there. I've been part of the civil rights movement. You story. You lied. You was alive like us during the civil rights movement, but you ain't been out there in the movement. You ain't been to move. Everybody else been to move. You been you better keep your head down. You been like they say on Boondocks, you was going home for a rand court. Everybody else was getting hosed and all that stuff.
I know.
So, you know, it's amazing, but like you say, you know, when you have that energy within you to stand up and do right, you really can't squelch that energy.
No,
you know,
can't.
When your vantage point is that we gotta go higher, before you know it, you already climbing. You cannot just sit down, take low, sit low, stay low, keep your voice silent. No, you end up speaking up even before you may realize it. And people see it in you. That's why they'll tell you, yeah, come on, be part of this. Come be part of this. You be a part of this. Because I remember when I first got the job, I was in college. Everybody there were people who had like grown kids, you know. So they told me first paycheck, they said, did you make sure that you signed up to be in the union? I said, actually, I did. I said, so I see now, I guess the spot on this box means, is that the union? They picked this out. They said, yeah, that's your dues in the union. So yeah, so you in the union. So if you have any problem, you, like you said, you can go to the union office, or you can call and ask any questions to find out what your benefits are, or if it don't feel like you getting treated right around here, you can speak to a delegate and they'll help you get treated right. So I have a great deal of respect for people who sacrifice money and time and energy and sacrifice their jobs to fight for other people. And so tell me, whenever I think about Labor Day, I automatically think of A. Philip Randolph. That's the first person that comes to my mind, you know, because I know in his case, he sacrificed everything pretty much. He didn't have a lot of money, wasn't no rich man, none of that, just to be out here fighting for the brotherhood of Pullman car porters. So when y'all think of unions, I mean, or Labor Day rather, you know, what comes to your mind first when you think of Labor Day?
Well, I guess I could say, since I'm from New York originally, I think of the whole Labor Day, the whole Caribbean Day.
Yeah, how could you not? How could you not in New York, especially in Brooklyn? You was in Brooklyn. How could you not think of
because
and the Labor Day parade, right?
because it even starts before Labor Day. You have Juve, and you have, celebrations. You have the Panifest, with all the steel pan bands and the costumers, marching, all of that celebration. But prominent in that is 1199.
Interesting.
Because every nurse's assistant I would see, anybody, person of color who I would see in a nursing uniform, if they didn't work in a small clinic that wasn't part of the union, they all were 1199. Mm-hmm. So whenever I think Labor Day, I would always think 1199, because we would always run into each other day in and day out. And then I'd run into people who I knew were delegates in other institutions on Eastern Parkway. And so when I think of Labor Day, I think of that big celebration. And I think of the power of that celebration as well, where it's kind of been watered down since. But there was a time when we literally would shut the city down from Utica Avenue and Eastern Parkway.
Yep, I remember that.
Grand Army Plaza.
Army Plaza, yep.
Especially on Labor Day. From 6 a.m. sometimes until 6 a.m. the next day. We would have the run of all of Crown Heights and Flatbush, Brooklyn. Right. For that celebration. So that's, I think of the strength. I think of the strength in numbers, and I think of the strength in numbers in people of color when I think about Labor Day.
Yeah. What about you, Elder Town? What do you think about when you think of Labor Day?
When I think of Labor Day, I go back to what Kwame says. I think about the Communication Workers of America and the people that I work with at Southern Bell and AT&T, and how the Communication Workers of America Union afforded me an opportunity to travel for the company all over the place and be able to actually, fly this place and fly that place and learn. Because without them being able to keep my job, I would have been not able to do what I'm doing now. So when I think about Labor Day, I think about the dedication that I had to do in order to continue to make sure that I took care of my family, but also how CWA played a part in that by allowing me to be able to say, no, I'm not going to take that. Y'all need to do better. So that's what I think about. And it's so many things that came from, just being able to work in a place where I had a little bit of peace, because at some point there was no peace. But then after a while, I became more peaceful when I knew that I could go to the union and I make sure that I have a paper trail.
I know that's right. Yeah. And it's so wonderful, because even when we talk about paper trails, y'all know me back on the history thing, those paper trails that are left from the newspaper articles, from the records of people filing these suits that y'all mentioned, these are part of our Black legacy. Right. This is the Black history story that you don't have to wait until February for somebody to tell. There's probably somebody right in your family, could be an uncle or auntie, the grandma or grandpa, that were in some union somewhere and that understood why it was called union, because you're unified, work together, chilling, don't you get weary, okay? And so it's interesting, because when Kwame said that part about the celebration, I know a lot of people probably answered my question at home and said, I take a day off. They look at Labor Day as just another holiday, a day off, a day to kick back, barbecue, relax, and we have to look at that. In the history of Black labor in North America, our African ancestors rarely got a day off. Right. So of course, it was rare. We had Christmas, you had New Year's, like Eve, kind of where watch night into New Year's Day. You might have had, and it's a big might have had so-called Thanksgiving Day, okay, to give thanks. Might have, if this particular enslaver claim or purported to be Christian, they might have said, well, for that reason, we ain't gonna work, y'all. But really, because who cooked your food that day? Who served you and your wife and your turn? So it wasn't really no real day off, but at least you might get an opportunity to get a little better food that day than you had on other days. But we know that there's a historic paper trail that does point to a great deal, if not all, we ain't gonna never say all because we don't know all of them, but we'll say a great deal of the Southern plantation system allowed the enslaved to be released from work on Christmas Day. Because I guess they thought Jesus would get them otherwise and they might burn in hell if they did. And then New Year's, only because they likely were sleeping on drunks themselves. So it wasn't too much nobody was doing on that first day of the year. And then when Emancipation Day came, you know, hang it up. We done anyway with all of that. But throughout the year, think about that. Think about the comparison that we're talking about. That 2 days a year is all you guaranteed that you might not have to work. Right. Okay, versus us then moving into Reconstruction period and the start of Black labor unions and Black virgins to their own union. I noticed, I ain't gonna talk about it, but I noticed when I looked up a few unions, there are still in the same city, one union that look almost all Black and another union that looks almost all white right now in 2020. All right, and so that's why you got all these different chapters and different ones, you know. Sometimes the leadership is still not the same. Who they're fighting for politically may not be the same. What they're fighting for may not be the same. So again, the agenda. So at least our ancestors had an agenda to say, hold up, wait a minute. We ain't gonna be doing this now. Because see, we know slavery. And if you're trying to work us every day, all day, no break, that called slavery. That ain't called work. That ain't called job. That called slavery. So we ain't gonna do that. So they fought to again negotiate their rights, negotiate contracts that improve the working conditions for the people working then, but then for all of us generations later who came into joining unions in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, that we joined these unions, and then these unions still exist now, and the battles to have unions still exist now. So as we getting ready to close out, and you think about our ancestors and the Black labor force that they are, that they were, that we are sitting on what they built in North America. They literally used their blood and their sweat to hold this place together as they shaped it with their own hands. And at the time we're in now, with people pouring in the streets to protest, then the NBA striking, the WNBA striking, to go ahead and say, we are not going to play while the cops still kill our people out here. We're not going to. So even in this time, the strikes matter. Not being a scab, or as we would say, even a scrub now, matters, right? So when we're talking about Black labor at this time, what would you say to the children, what do you now and things like that, about being unified, being in union with others, especially with other Black people, as we have Black folks, Gullah Geechee folks listening, people of Africa listening today to this, the people of the Caribbean, all of us of the African diaspora, children of Mother Africa listening. Elder Town, what would you say to our people about being in union with one another now, and what that does for our ancestors who were the true Black labor, not just in North America, but in everywhere where they were placed in the diaspora?
Well, I would say that I bear witness that the union was a good thing for me to be in. And I bear witness that union, the word union is just a good word anyway. It means coming together and being one and making sure our vibration on the same vibe, that we can obtain the things that we need to do. That means, you know, holding on to the land and understanding that we are what we are looking for. We are what we are looking for. Yes, so that's what I would tell the young people.
That's right. We are the
continue, right. Continue to love yourself first. But remember that your community is larger than your family. And just think that, what can you do to bring the union together? Let's take it personal. What can you do to bring the family and the community together? So that's what I would tell them. Look within themselves and find their purpose and go out there and do it.
Excellent. Kwame, what would you say?
Well, I'd say the same thing. In fact, 1199 did, in fact, organize and put together a youth division for the younger workers that came in, and they have their own leadership within the union.
Wow.
They talk amongst themselves and meet amongst themselves with the issues that they have, and they bring those issues with, to us. And out of that, we saw a lot of gender issues being addressed. So I would say, especially in the South, the youth really need to get together and push to form unions, because like you said, the whole idea, the South riches and progress came on unpaid labor. You got your wealth through unpaid labor. And that's the fight they're trying to keep unions out now, so that they can continue to keep you in these harsh, low-paying
jobs.
Jobs that they're still jobs of service as they've been all these years. And we have, that's what
service or servitude.
Yeah,
jobs of service or servitude.
So there should be fairness in the way they were treated. So I would say to young people, y'all need to fight for, having a lot of the jobs that y'all are working on, having those jobs unionized. You need to really push for unions. And it's kind of unfortunate because, the union thing seems to be polarized in terms of politics. Most unions, not all, but most unions seem to be on the Democratic side as opposed to the Republican side. So, it of course, it always starts at the ground grassroots level.
Right.
But it has to start there. Unify there, work your way forward, start working with your local political offices, county council, on up, your mayors, your governors, and then start working with your Senate and your congressional people to really start to push to look for more fair working situations, more fair wages. And again, as we always say, there's strength in numbers. And keep getting vocal, keep getting out in the streets, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Right. Absolutely. And I must say this, it's just a perfect note that you mentioned that about the strength in numbers, because you already heard me scream. I ain't going to scream on the air, but I'm just going to tell y'all about to beat drums out of town, because we, just before this broadcast, are only about 200 people short of 26,000 folks that have joined in union and unified with the Gullah Geechee Nation to stop destruction at Bay Point.
Yeah.
And they are signing that petition. They are standing out here with us. We got yard signs out. People are ready to protest in spite of the pandemic. People are like, tell us when the meeting is. So that meeting may be held this month. And so it is. They said they're going to do it a hybrid meeting where some people can meet virtually and others can meet actually in person. I pray that, y'all know I'm a computer scientist, so I'm praying that it's so many virtual people on there that we break the internet, as we say.
Oh, wow.
That we just plug up the thing, shut the site down and all that with it. What happened? All right, I'm on that, Chuck D. Shut them down. Shut them down. Shut them down. Because we got to shut down this storytelling, this lying, that this is ecotourism. It is not ecotourism. As I said, our ancestors, our elders, used their blood, sweat, and tears, their blood spilled in the streets. We talked about the strikes, but we ain't talk about how many people, we talked about intimidation in the strikes, but we ain't talk about the deaths.
Yeah, people gave the ultimate sacrifice.
People literally died. They were martyred. The ultimate
sacrifice.
Right, so we have an easier time now where you can protest from your fingers. You can sign petitions online. You can talk junk on Zoom. You don't have to never get out here in the street. You can go take a picture, go stand outside and let the crowd be behind you and take a selfie and run back in your house and all that kind of stuff as the protesters go by. You can borrow somebody's sign and look like you're doing something. Listen, those of us who've actually been out here on the front line for decades, we telling you that people will try to come up against you as you come up against them. When you use your political will and you use your cultural capital and you say we demand a certain thing, because power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. When you stand unified with others, somebody gonna try to push against you now, but the group can push so much stronger back.
Yes.
The group can push so much stronger back. So I am so happy today to see how much pushback is happening now against destruction men in the Gullah Geechee Nation. That people who are native and not native are saying enough is a doggone enough now. Y'all don't need to build nothing else there, and y'all need to leave the Gullah Geechee people land alone. You need to stop it, and you need to stop disrupting the ecology of the environment. And so that is where we are standing in unity, and it's such a blessing, you know, and our labor is not in vain. Our labor is not in vain. And as Elder Town mentioned also, and I've mentioned it about the land, thank you to all 100 children who done get to we GoFundMe campaign. We finally reached the 20K mark on yesterday. We finally reached that benchmark of 20,000. So in October, yes, praise the Lord. Yes, thank you. And so for those who want to continue to give, go to GoFundMe to the Gullah Geechee-Land-Legacy-Fund. GoFundMe, the Gullah Geechee-Land-Legacy-Fund, and continue to give. Because when we're out here doing these political battles, it takes money. It takes money. It takes money to fight these things. And even when you say you're going on strike, the signs cost you money. It could cost you your job. That costs you money. Okay, so the money goes into us legally fighting these battles, also assisting with taxes when need be, and also just educating our community about what have we all been talking about, their rights. So please, if you say, well, I don't fool up with GoFundMe, Queen, I don't deal with that. A lot of people have become unified during this pandemic through giving donations directly to individuals and to causes through Cash App. You can do that as well. Go to $ Gullah Geechee Nation, $ Gullah Geechee Nation on Cash App. Donate any amount, because literally every dollar counts. Every moment counts in life. Every choice you make counts. Every time you speak up, it counts. You might think it's not a big deal, but it can make all the difference in the world for the coming generations. You've heard us talk about that. That's why we're honoring first our ancestors that worked in unity in the task system on plantations, but they thought, and they left this your land. They worked till they left this your land. So how we going to work against one another instead of work together, children, for hold upon the land now. And to hold on to our rights, our water rights, our land rights, our human rights. And so the more unified you become, the more energy you have. Because you're not flying solo. You got a whole group of folks flying in formation together. And sometimes you can just coax on the power of the wind beneath the other's wings. When you get tired, you feel weary, they don't let you fall, because together we're unified. This is what the unions were always about. This is what they're about now. So as Brother Kwame Shah said, if you're not in one, and you were wondering, should you do it? If your job offers it, we all say a resounding yes. Okay, definitely. Join on and join the union, because it can benefit you greatly. And so definitely, any final words as we going on into Labor Day? Just a quick final word, some positive energy y'all want to send to the family. Kwame, go ahead.
I would just say once again, stay strong, stay united. That's how we win.
Elder Town?
I just want to say I love you. Stay strong, like Kwame said, and peace and blessings to everyone.
Yes, and we always send you peace and blessings from here in the Gullah Geechee Nation. You can continue to follow us at gullahgeechee-nation.com, gullahgeechee-nation.com, or at Gullah Geechee on Instagram, at Gullah Geechee on Twitter. That's GULLAHGEECHEE, and no I in Geechee. Okay, and so definitely the Geechee is about all of we, and that's what we try to continue to fight for unity. 100 children, if you ain't been you ain't know who I be. Queen Quet, Chieftess and head of state of the Gullah Geechee Nation, and we so glad that 100 tuning in one more getting. Guess what? You can see this again on Gullah Geechee TV station. Follow gullahgeechee.tv, subscribe for free, and follow we, and keep up with all of the journey, what's going on. If you go to gullahgeechee-nation.com and you type in unions, you'll see that I've blogged about this topic before, giving you a great deal of background, history, and our story, and spoken about it many times on Gullah Geechee Rhythm Radio, which is a sister program to Zooming In on Sustainability. But we are so glad that we had this opportunity to begin this celebration ahead of Labor Day to help honor our ancestors that labored so hard for this day, so that we could still stand here, sit here in unity and zoom in on union. And we pray that you go on out there now and y'all get unified, especially in the Black community worldwide. Peace and love, everybody. This year, the Queen Quet, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation, where the body is unified for truth. That's just how we do. Peace and blessings, everybody. Enjoy Labor Day and keep on fighting for your rights.
Peace.